Let's begin with part one, the boy who dreamed of conquest. Part one, the boy who dreamed of conquest. They say greatness is not born in peace, but in struggle. Before he was Alexander the Great, he was just a boy, a restless soul trapped in the shadows of a king and the expectations of a legend. In 356 BCE, in the ancient city of Pella, the cries of a newborn echoed through the marble halls of Macedon. His father, King Philip II, was forging a powerful army, uniting the Greek city-states under his iron rule. His mother, Queen Olympias, whispered to him that his blood was not ordinary. She told him he was descended from Achilles, the hero of Troy. From that moment, Alexander's destiny was no longer mortal. It was myth. As a child, Alexander was curious, stubborn, and fierce. He did not play with toys, he played with maps. His eyes burned with a question. How far can a man go? When he was just 12, his father bought a wild horse no one could tame. Bucephalus. The beast roared, kicking and snapping at every soldier who dared approach. But Alexander noticed something his father didn't. The horse was afraid of its own shadow. He turned Bucephalus toward the sun so the shadow fell behind him, and the beast calmed. He mounted it. He tamed it. And as the horse galloped across the fields, Philip II turned to his men and said, "My son, find a kingdom worthy of you. Macedonia is too small." That moment defined him. He had not just tamed a horse, he had conquered fear itself. His father taught him the art of war, but his mind was shaped by another. Aristotle, the greatest philosopher of the age. The young prince studied logic, poetry, science, and strategy. He devoured Homer's Iliad and carried it everywhere like a holy book. To him, Achilles was not just a story, it was a prophecy. But behind that brilliance was fire, a hunger, a silent fury toward his father, who ruled with glory but often dismissed his son as too young, too emotional, too reckless. When Philip remarried, casting doubt on Alexander's place as heir, their relationship shattered. Words were exchanged, blades were almost drawn. Alexander fled the palace. For the first time, the boy who would conquer the world found himself exiled from it. But exile did not break him. It sharpened him. He returned a man forged in resentment and ambition. And then the unthinkable happened. Philip was assassinated. In a single night, the kingdom trembled. The father was dead. The throne stood empty, and all eyes turned to the young prince. Barely 20. Rivals circled like vultures. Greece saw an opportunity to rebel. The great Persian Empire watched, amused, thinking Macedon would crumble. But Alexander did not mourn. He acted. In days, he crushed uprisings. In weeks, he secured loyalty. And within months, he led his army to the gates of Thebes, the strongest of all Greek cities. When Thebes revolted, Alexander gave them one warning: surrender. They refused. He unleashed fury. Thebes was razed to the ground. Over 6,000 killed, 30,000 enslaved. The message was clear. The boy king has become a storm. From the ashes of Thebes rose a name that would soon echo across the earth: Alexander of Macedon. And as he stood before his men, armor gleaming in the dawn, he declared, "We march east, not to conquer land, but to conquer time." The world would soon remember that declaration, because this young king, barely past 20, was about to face the greatest empire the world had ever known: Persia, a titan that stretched from Egypt to India. But Alexander did not see an empire. He saw destiny. Part 2, the War of Titans, Alexander versus Persia. The year was 334 BCE. A young king stood on the edge of the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Europe from Asia. Behind him, Greece. Before him, Persia, the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. As the sea wind roared, Alexander took a handful of water and poured it into the waves, whispering, "Accept me, O sea, as I cross into Asia, not as invader, but as liberator." And with that step, the greatest military campaign in history began. The Persian Empire stretched across continents, from the mountains of Anatolia to the deserts of Egypt and the plains of India. It was a colossus of wealth, armies, and kings. Its ruler, Darius III, commanded hundreds of thousands. But Alexander, only 22, had something Persia did not, an unbreakable will. His army was small, 40,000 men. Greeks and Macedonians forged into a single machine. Their weapon, the phalanx, a wall of long spears and iron discipline. Their heart, a king who rode with them, not behind them. When they reached the river Granicus, Persia sent its first army to crush the boy from Macedon. The Persians waited on the opposite bank, their cavalry gleaming in the sunlight. The river ran fast, deep and treacherous. Alexander's generals warned him not to attack. He looked at them and said, "I would be ashamed to cross the sea and fear a river." Then he spurred Bucephalus forward. The Macedonians roared and followed. Spears clashed, horses screamed, blood mixed with the current. Alexander was struck, his helmet shattered, his neck cut open, but he did not fall. He fought through the chaos like a man possessed. By sunset, the Persians were broken. The first of many victories had begun. But this was not conquest for conquest's sake. In every city he took, Alexander spared those who surrendered. He rebuilt temples, restored order, and claimed to be the chosen of the gods. He wanted not to destroy Persia, but to become it. Soon he reached Gordium, where a legendary knot waited. An ancient prophecy said that whoever could untie it would rule all of Asia. Alexander tried once, twice, and then smiling, he drew his sword and sliced it in half. "It's not about how you untie the knot," he said. "It's about having the courage to cut through it." That night, thunder echoed across the Anatolian plains, a storm announcing his destiny. The next year, the armies of Darius III met him at Issus. The Persian force outnumbered Alexander's 2-1, but Alexander had mastered the art of chaos. He moved fast, striking from angles no one expected. His phalanx pinned the Persians in place while his cavalry smashed their flanks. And then, Alexander saw Darius himself in his golden chariot. With fire in his eyes, he charged straight at him. Darius turned, fled. His army collapsed. The King of Kings had run from a boy barely 23. The spoils were unimaginable. Treasures, weapons, and something greater. Darius's own family. Alexander treated them not as prisoners, but as royalty. He dined with them, protected them, and sent a message to Darius. "Come to me, not as an enemy, but as a brother. Let the world have one king, not two," but Darius refused. And so, Alexander marched deeper into the heart of Persia. He entered Egypt next, the land of the Nile and forgotten gods. There he was not a conqueror, but a savior. The Egyptians, weary of Persian rule, welcomed him as a god. At Siwa Oasis, deep in the desert, he visited the oracle of Amun-Ra. The priest declared him the son of Zeus. And though Alexander never claimed divinity aloud, something inside him changed that day. He began to believe, perhaps he was chosen. From Egypt he looked east, to Persia's final stronghold, where Darius had gathered a massive army to reclaim his empire. The battle that awaited them would be the stuff of legend, a clash not just of armies, but of worlds, the mighty battle of Gaugamela. If the desert winds carried whispers of fate, Alexander's scouts brought reports. Darius's army was enormous, over 250,000 men, elephants, chariots, archers, the full weight of Persia. Alexander had only 47,000. The odds were impossible. On the night before battle, his generals worried. They urged him to attack under darkness. He shook his head and said, "I will not steal victory in the shadows. The sun will witness who is chosen." As dawn rose over the plains of Gaugamela, Alexander gazed upon the horizon. Endless lines of men, banners and gold. But his heart did not waver. He mounted Bucephalus, raised his sword and shouted, "Remember why we fight, not for gold, not for glory, but for the dream that no man can chain us." The battle began with thunder. Persian chariots charged, but Alexander's men parted, letting them pass, then surrounded and cut them down. He saw an opening, a weak point in the Persian center, and he struck like lightning. The Macedonian phalanx surged forward. When the sun set, Alexander stood alone on the battlefield, surrounded by the silence of conquest. He was now the king of Asia. But as the bodies lay across the sand and victory banners waved, his eyes were distant. Because somewhere deep within, he knew this was not the end. The world was far bigger, and his hunger far greater.